Hello and welcome to Projector, and on this installment, husband and wife Michael Jai White and Jillian White must take back their daughter from the hands of human trafficker Mickey Rourke. Zara, played by Jillian White, is living a comfortable life as a lawyer with her husband Brian, played by Michael Jai White, and her stepdaughter Audrey, played by Priscilla Walker. When Zara saves the life of a barista, the footage makes headline news, bringing her new life to the attention of a dangerous figure from her past, Patrick, played by Mickey Rourke. Patrick enacts his vengeance upon Zara, sending men to kill her and threaten her family, ultimately abducting Audrey, and now Zara must confront her secrets if she's going to save Audrey from Patrick's human trafficking ring. Take Back essentially is a vehicle for husband and wife Michael Jai White and Jillian White, who have previously worked together on a number of films, including Cops and Robbers, Never Back Down 3, and Welcome to Sudden Death, the latter of which they actually had a fight scene together. Yes, that's her kicking his ass on that film's cover, apparently to Michael Jai White's great amusement. But Take Back actually sets itself apart from those movies because they both have lead roles in this. In fact, for Gillian, this is her first starring role as the main character. The film was directed by Christian Sesma, who has helmed a number of direct-to-video action films. He previously worked with Michael Jai White on Vigilante Diaries, but I'm most familiar with his work on last year's Pay Dirt with Luke Goss and Val Kilmer, which was a very sleepy heist thriller in the Guy Ritchie mould. Take Back is also notable for the fact that it's one of the very first productions to film after productions resumed during the COVID-19 pandemic, and thus apparently it was quite a troubled shoot where they were having to frequently rework the script and minimise the amount of people involved, as well as being regularly tested. And credit to the filmmakers, that really doesn't show in the final product. I genuinely wouldn't have been able to guess that this filmed during the pandemic, so kudos for that. The film's publicity also states that this is inspired by true events, and the only thing that I can claim about this is that they keep bringing up in the interviews how human trafficking is a very real issue in the world, which, yes, it is, but that doesn't mean that your movie is inspired by true events. That's not what that means at all. By that logic, virtually every movie ever made could claim to be inspired by true events. That's not how that claim works. As I mentioned previously, Jillian White has the central role here, and even though the script wasn't specifically written for her, you can very easily see why this appealed to her so much. It's because it is such a substantial role that could be a great showcase for someone like her. Not just on the action side of the equation, but also on the dramatic side as well. Zara is someone who has gone through this awful, harrowing experience of being abducted and placed into this world of human trafficking, and then she's managed to find the resiliency to fight her way out of it and never stopped. And she's built this new life and identity for herself with this loving family, husband and stepdaughter, and become this respected lawyer. And she has tried as hard as she can to put what happened to her in the rearview mirror. And then suddenly it comes back with a vengeance and threatens everything that she has worked so hard for, and she has to fight to protect what's hers. And credit to White, I think that she portrays this side of the movie very well. The fact that this character, underneath this happy family facade, has this dark secret, this dark side to her, this strength, but also this ferocity that allowed her to escape the first time, that she has to summon in order to quell it once and for all, and also reckon with something that she spent so long trying to run away from that she's never really actually got over it. She's still got this lingering trauma and PTSD. She has flashbacks all throughout the movie. Because White is so convincing playing a survivor, it lends a credibility to the character and to the film in general, which I think could have been lost in the hands of a lesser performer. But she's also very credible as an action star. Her martial arts skills are very impressive. You only have to look at that initial takedown in the coffee shop, which is lightning fast, bang bang, and it's over. And that's what White brings to the fight scenes, that real quick immediacy that I think helps, because in general, the action scenes are decent, but they're not excellently executed. And I think that because of that, because White is so competent, I think that she elevates those fight scenes. You especially see this in the encounter when an assassin is sent to her home and she takes him down in the kitchen. And that fight scene is probably the best in the entire movie because we really get to see White do her stuff. And also, it's got a fairly memorable kill in it. She takes him down with a pizza cutter. I can't say I've seen that before in a movie. I will say I was a little bit disappointed later on in the movie. There's another sequence where she has to fight more bad guys in a boardroom and they cheat and turn out the lights. And I think some of this is because of the COVID-19 protocols and they were trying to minimize contact, but that feels like they've really very much cheaped out there, and it does seem like they didn't really have enough time to actually stage these scenes in the way they really should do. They were kind of rushing through trying to get to the end of their filming day. But even so, I think that White shows just how much promise and how skilled she is as a martial artist. She trained with her husband Michael Jai White. That's how she got into martial arts. And you can even see this on screen. Husband and wife take self-defense classes together, much like how Gillian and Michael Jai White train together in real life. And I mean this as a compliment, but in a lot of their scenes together, it really doesn't feel like they're acting. If you've seen them in interviews together, you know how much of a loving, devoted couple they are, and that translates on screen. They have a very natural, very easy chemistry with each other that feels very genuine and sincere, and it makes you care about those characters. It feels like they put a lot of themselves into the roles on screen, and it works. What I will say is that it's clear that Michael Jai White is deliberately trying to play against type. He's not trying to be the action hero here. He's playing a history teacher who really doesn't know what to do in this situation and is just trying to do his best to support his wife. And I think that's a conscious choice to try and not overshadow Gillian. But even so, I didn't find this very refreshing because I'd already seen Michael Jai White in a movie earlier this year where he was sat behind a desk in Assault on VA-33 and didn't do very much action. And this is another role where I feel like he was very underutilized. It feels like he could have done so much more here. You get a couple of fleeting moments of action, but otherwise, most of that is handled by Jillian White. And that's fine, but it feels like the filmmakers have really missed an opportunity here by actually having them in fight scenes together, working off each other. That's what I really wanted to see in this, especially because Michael Jai White is more familiar to viewers, and when they see him in an action movie, they expect him to actually engage in it. So the fact that he's sidelined for most of the movie is disappointing on that level, but also I feel like if they actually had them working together, it would deliver on what action fans actually came here to see, which is Michael Jai White, and then introduce them to his wife, who is just as tough as he is. However, while the Whites considerably improve the movie with their presence, it feels like Take Back isn't deserving of them. As someone who sat through Pay Dirt, I can tell you right now that director Christian Sesma falls victim to exactly the same issues that he had on that movie. In fact, the biggest problem with his lackluster direction is his pacing, or lack thereof. It doesn't feel like he knows how to build tension in a thriller properly. Instead of trying to mount any kind of sense of threat or excitement, Take Back is surprisingly dull and uninvolving a lot of the time. It feels like a slow trudge through the desert in the same way that Pay Dirt did. And I think part of this is the fact that it feels like it takes quite a long time for the plot to actually get into proper movement. The stepdaughter is kidnapped about halfway through the movie, about 45 minutes in, and that's way too late. That should have been at the end of the first act. Even after the stepdaughter is kidnapped, it actually feels like the movie slows down from that point forward, instead of actually just building up a head of steam until the conclusion. In fact, what's really weird is that Take Back actually plonks a lot of its fight scenes at the very top of the movie, And then later on, you get long stretches without any real action in them. And that really shows they didn't know how to structure this properly. And maybe some of that is because they were rewriting on the fly and they had to eliminate sequences and restructure. But honestly, it feels very underwhelming a lot of the time. It feels like the movie just flattens out until the end credits, which is surprising because it's only about 80 minutes or so before those roll into frame, and yet by that point I was well and truly ready for this movie to be done, because even at that length it feels overlong. It feels like there really isn't that much content here. They haven't actually added enough of what audiences want to see out of a movie like this. You look at Taken, which this movie clearly wants to be given the title and the human trafficking theme, but in that movie you knew you were never far from an action sequence. The same cannot be said about Take Back, which feels so much longer than it is, and the finale of the film is just completely limp. It's this standoff shootout in the desert that feels very poorly directed. You've got characters wandering around in whatever direction. Zara apparently forgets that she came there to rescue her stepdaughter and just kind of leaves her abandoned for a long stretch of this to just have a talky confrontation. It's such a mess on screen. In the supporting roles, you've got James Russo as a cop who's actually interested in their case, and he does a bit of investigative work. He mostly serves as exposition through the movie, but for some reason Zara and her husband deliberately try to not tell him about anything that they're doing to try and get their stepdaughter back, even though it feels like he would be cooperative and aid them in that. At one point he actually says, "Oh, well, we can't trust the cops." Why? It seems like that guy's fairly trustworthy and actually wants to help you. It's something that really doesn't make any kind of sense. Also noteworthy in the supporting cast is Green Book writer Nick Vallelonga. Green Book is based on his father, who's apparently become a regular in Christian Sesma's movies. He pops up in one sequence meeting up with Russo in a bar, providing some key information as a retired detective, and it seems like in the flashbacks that there is a hint that there is a police cover-up of the human trafficking operation, but this is something that goes completely unexplored elsewhere in the movie. Again, this might have been something that was lost in the rewrites and may well explain why Michael Jai White's character says that line, but either way, it's something that is brought up and then just completely disappears, much like Vallelonga himself, who just turns up for about 5 minutes of the movie and then walks out of the bar, never to be heard from again. But maybe a major reason why the movie doesn't work is that it has such a poor villain. Clearly the filmmakers thought they had a coup in casting Mickey Rourke. Rourke actually gets top billing for this movie, even though he has far less screen time than the Whites. And Rourke can be a great actor when he wants to be, but he is given plenty of lazy, visibly disinterested performances over the years, and this is by far the latter. It is pretty evident that Rourke came onto the set of this movie and went, "I'm not acting, I'm barely even going to bother even looking at the script." And so the first time we see him in this movie, I kid you not, he is pampering his pet dogs. If you've been following Rourke's recent career, you'll know how much he likes to shoehorn his pets into the movies. Think of the bird in Iron Man 2 and things like that. And this is just another example of it. It feels like Rourke isn't coming here to perform as the villain of the movie, he's just here to play around with some dogs. This is our threatening and intimidating villain, folks. And then I think he improvises some really out of place monologue about a sexual encounter. Like, what is he even going on about? In fact, I don't even think he knows where he is half the time. I genuinely feel so sorry for the poor heirs of this movie having to cobble scenes together wholesale out of whatever he's mumbling about that isn't anything to do with the script whatsoever. In fact, there are several instances where they cut away to a TV screen showing the news report of the barista incident to make it appear like he's watching that, as opposed to just looking wherever his eye line is at any given moment. It's so obvious that they are trying to work around whatever Rourke has given them rather than work with it. In fact, at one point, they just straight up give up and just dub in a line from someone trying to impersonate Mickey Rourke.
Dwayne, take care of this.
This is clearly Rourke using his method actor reputation to pull these kind of unprofessional antics and ride roughshod over these filmmakers and show an abject, Seagal-like disdain for everyone that he's working with. In fact, most of the first hour of this film, he's in shots and scenes completely by himself. It's an hour before he starts sharing a frame with another actor. In fact, I thought he was just going to be shot entirely by himself for the whole movie. That's how bad things were getting in this film. But no, he does actually start getting involved in the movie later on and actually interact with a couple of other cast members. But even so, he still doesn't muster up the energy to actually have any kind of investment. This isn't even phoning it in, because that would imply that there was a baseline level of competency here. You don't even get that. You could have literally plucked anyone off the street and they probably would have given a better performance than Mickey Rourke does in this film. At the finale of this film, Rourke is wearing a pair of extremely reflective sunglasses where the filmmakers have had to very badly blur them out every time he wears them because he's reflecting the crew. And because he doesn't know what to do with himself during this long dialogue scene, he just keeps taking his sunglasses off and putting them back on, and taking them off and putting them back on, over and over again. Just leave them off, Mickey, because then we don't have to look at the horrible blurring effect that they had to add in editing. I was getting so angry because, frankly, this should not be tolerated. This is, frankly, one of the worst performances I have ever seen from an established performer. If nothing else, Take Back proves that Jillian White has the potential to be an action star, but she and Michael Jai White deserve better films than this one. This is a sleepy, lethargic action thriller that's generic at best, and at worst features Mickey Rourke doing his best Cameron Mitchell impression. Aside from a couple of half-decent fight scenes and the Whites themselves, there's very little to recommend here. And I just want to mention about the human trafficking theme through this movie. They've talked about in the interviews how they want to treat it respectfully, but that's not the vibe I got from watching the movie itself, especially some of the leering camera work in these scenes. Honestly, it felt very sleazy and sensationalized at times, and that made me uncomfortable. I will say though, I don't want the Whites to be discouraged. I want them to make another action film, a better one, where they actually fight in tandem. Now that's what I want to see. If you like this review, then you can buy me a Ko-fi, or you can really kick ass over at my Patreon, where you can see my reviews early among other perks, including access to my Discord server. But until next time, I'm Matthew Buck, fading out.